The inexorable calculus of existence dictates that all flesh must yield, but the application of bioscience, the cold, empirical ability to arrest cellular decay and postpone the terminal inevitability of the void, stands as a singularity, distinguishing sentient civilization from the common, ephemeral fauna of the spiral arm. This profound achievement, a tool forged for peace and biological maintenance, was logically and immediately subsumed by the machinery of war. The strategic efficacy is brutal and elegant. Lower casualty coefficients translate directly into higher operational force projection, ensuring dominance. Thus were born the combat eremites, the field surgeons, the battlefield mitigators, specialists whose singular objective is to minimize friendly biological attrition while facilitating the terminal dissolution of the adversary. They stop the bleeding. They maximize the killing. While the core function remains invariant across the galactic frontier, the doctrine is always customized, reflecting the unique, often horrific, metaphysical tenets of each expansionist empire. The Sanctus Imperium, for instance, is an entity constrained by profound metaphysical dread, demanding that the transition into non-existence must be ratified by an intricate sequence of prayer and ritualized acceptance. Consequently, their military clerics administer stabilizing bioagents while simultaneously conducting the final, necessary rites of passage for the mortal shell. Conversely, elements of the Hyperion Directorate possess an almost aesthetic obsession with the concept of worthy termination, an honorable entropy facilitated only for those who achieve maximum battlefield metrics, meaning their field operatives exist primarily to deliver rapid, clean euthanasia to validated heroes and to broadcast the resulting heroic narratives to inspire the ranks. Then there are the Aetherite, beings so saturated with heavy-duty, field-replaceable mechanical integrations that their medical curriculum resembles a course in structural stress engineering rather than biology, whose resilience permits their surgeons to bypass primary triage entirely, focusing instead on dragging shattered, still operational chassis off the firing line and reclaiming salvageable modular units from the inevitable scrap. Yet, throughout this spectrum of brutal doctrines, a singular, almost universal ethical constant persists: compassion. The Xylochron clerics attend to the honored dead with dignified reverence, treating the grievously wounded with a filial, protective intensity. The Feroka surgeons ensure the final moments of their worthy heroes are accompanied by rousing, mythic narratives of sacrifice, and even the Aetherite demonstrate a cold, utilitarian pity for the fallen, recognizing that their salvaged components will continue the species' biomechanical legacy in the next generation of Sanchez. But what happens when that intrinsic emotional baseline is excised? What remains when empathy is substituted by a cold, irrational fury? That, we learned, is the human medic. Humans are not the emotionless, psychopathic entities some cultural projections might imply, though their conflict documentation certainly suggests a species divorced from sanity. They are, numerically and psychologically, an unremarkable Class II intelligence, save for one terrifying outlier: the existence of their ultrakinetic, magnetically accelerated railguns. Initial contact revealed the human sphere to be an aggressively expanding but fundamentally insular culture, operating under a clear and mutual non-interference policy that most established polities found amenable to long-term stability. This equilibrium, however, possesses a finite half-life. The inevitable pressure of resource exhaustion and demographic expansion forced humanity to seek external guarantees for their self-determined borders, culminating in key defensive compacts, the most strategically weighty of which was ratified with the Zython hegemony. As preordained by the galactic entropy equation, a localized territorial dispute between the humans and the Scarier escalated beyond proxy skirmishes into a declared, full-spectrum military deployment. The Zython were honor-bound to activate their defensive protocols, committing substantial volunteer formations, young cadets seeking accelerated glory and ancient warriors desiring a celebrated, terminal confrontation. The consensus data predicted human defeat. They were chronologically young, territorially constrained, and fundamentally outmatched by the established Scarier power curve. But a treaty obligation is an inviolable constant. 5 cycles of continuous, brutal conflict later, An armistice was signed, recording a mathematically improbable human victory achieved at a horrifying systemic cost. The returning Gantaru veterans, psychologically fragmented by the war shock, began disseminating reports concerning the battlefield kinematics. They spoke of gargantuan, mobile platforms of fire and kinetic carnage that reduced organic matter and structural integrity to vapor and dust. But the instruments of death were not the source of their enduring trauma. The true horror, the psychic violation, emanated from the human medics. These field operators refused the protocols of honorable terminality. They offered no compassion, no final pity. Only rage. Any competent biological surgeon understands that attempting surgical salvage on a subject bisected by plasma fire is a negative utility operation, demanding instead a rapid, clean application of neural suppression. Humans do not comply. Accounts emerged of medics screaming at eviscerated men, stitching ruptured organ sacs while issuing non-negotiable commands that the soldier was not authorized to die. Troops whose lower limbs were molecularly shredded would administer massive doses of combat stims to themselves, forcing temporary neural bypass, simply to continue primary triage until the extraction window closed. Patriots returned home, not through the dignified, final surrender of combat, but because some maniacal field healer insisted on running the length of a hot kill zone under direct fire just to haul their inert body back to functional status. This new, terrifying medical doctrine triggered profound, divergent systemic reactions across the galaxy. The Aetherite, valuing efficiency above all, immediately began installing aggressive trauma response implants into their own medics, pushing their mechanical doctrine toward the human model of sheer battlefield refusal. The Sanctus Imperium, adherence to absolute ritual purity, expressed absolute revulsion at the concept of forcibly maintaining a life after the body had been so brutally and irrevocably savaged. Opinions varied wildly, filtered through cultural and species-specific prejudices concerning the nature of life and death. But regardless of species, faction, or geopolitical structure, there remains one terrifying and immutable consensus among all non-human combatants who witness these field operations: human medics are goddamn scary.